Good morning and welcome to our virtual Cafecito, the first one for the New England Region office. My name is Janit Cibeles and I'm the New England Regional Director for Hispanic Federation. Hispanic Federation have over 30 years in the making. Our office in Connecticut has since 2013 has been operating. Our mission as an organization is to empower and advance the Hispanic community place and strengthen Latino institutions through the work in the areas of education, health, immigration, civic engagement, economic empowerment, and the environment. We will be broadcasting these virtual cafecitos every month, the third Thursday of every month at 10 o'clock in the morning, with the intention of highlighting the work of our member agencies in superintendents, empowering our community, and connecting with families to organizations, programs, and services in the community. Today, we will talk about historical government job opportunities that is upcoming now this year and hopefully next year as well. For this, I will be hosting a conversation with two of the authors of the Future and Pay Equity and Representation in Connecticut Executive Branch. This report, authored by two of our panelists, will detail how certain executive branch state agencies will continue to be dominated by white men, lagging others in employing people of colors and women. Our discussion of the soon-to-be empty vacancies are filled with more diverse personnel, in addition to making sure the state can continue to provide services. Throughout the conversation, you are welcome to drop the questions in the chat. Without further ado, join me with your cup of coffee or tea or water. This morning, we will have this conversation and we will welcome our special guest. Guest, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
First,
you for having us.
absolutely. First, we will come with the conversation with Dr. Mohammed. And I want to share, Dr. Mohammed, a little bit of your background and expertise on your field. Mohammed is a professor and head of the Department of Public Policy at the University of Connecticut. His research interests include social equity and disparate outcomes of policy on individuals and communities of color. Dr. Al-Qadri Mohammed has authored more than 50 communities and professional studies, primarily addressing inequity and development issues in the communities of color. He conducts the biannual compensation and retention studies for the National Institute of Public Procurement. Thank you so much once again. I'm so happy to have you today. And also, I wanted to present our second panelist, which is the State Controller, Natalie, who is the first Black person and second woman to hold this position. Rascal served for 10 years as a general counsel and assistant for the State Controller under Kevin Lambo. As the agency's chief legal officer, she has an extraordinary background in education, she negotiated and drafted a number of technology, healthcare, pharmacy, and consulting contracts with statewide impact, and served as the chief negotiator for transformative agreements to modernize service delivery and save taxpayers' dollars. Our final panelist for today is Tara. She is the Assistant State Controller. Tara has over 20 years of career in the state policy and communication. She served as the State Controller appointed on the Government Council on Women's and Girls. She is a New York native. Tara began her career as a print news reporter in Connecticut, covering government and breaking news through the state. And now she has made the position of chief to state the government as a policy and communication advisor to the state attorney general, where she managed policy and media relationships involving litigation on the national financial crisis, illegal pharmaceutical marketing, and environmental protection. So I will say that we have extraordinary experts today to talk about one of the issues that we will be facing, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity for our communities of colors to seek for higher paid and further professional career path. So we will start with the report that they all together put together, and we will want to know what were their findings. So I would like to start with you both and say, what are some of the key findings from your recent report that you think that are important to share with our audience today?
Well, I mean, I think the most important finding is that a lot of, Connecticut is doing really well in a lot of key areas in terms of gender and racial balance in the highest levels of government. But there are also certain occupations and agencies where, for some time, there have been disparities in representation and compensation. And when you look at new hires who pretty much reflect where the state is headed, those disparities continue. And not meant to be an indictment of
Mhm.
any one administration, but I really commend the governor and the lieutenant governor for making space for us to do this analysis and to really give us the opportunity to talk about the data and really begin the work of figuring out what is it that is not working and what do we need to do.
Have you, do you think that any of the results on this report will influence any kind of policy change or campaigns around these jobs?
We hope so, right? I mean, the hope is that people will get it. I want to second what Tara said earlier, that I really appreciate that this study was commissioned in the first place by the Connecticut Council of Women and Girls and was supported by State Controller Kevin Limbo and now with State Controller Natalie Braswell. And I appreciate the relationship we've had with Tara Downs, who's been just a great partner on this. Um, but it's the idea is and the kind of transparency that existed throughout this study and throughout this report is an indicator that people are interested in doing better moving forward. So I mean, I have a lot of hope that that's an indicator that people are going to look at this very seriously and move on with the recommendations to make things better moving forward.
And your report, it's very thorough, right? It provides a lot of details and insights. I would like to hear from Natalie, in terms of how you think that this report outcomes will influence in any immediate campaigns or policy change.
I think, as Tara and Dr. Al-Qadri had said, the purpose of this report is to have it influence policy and to change the way in which state government and the individual state agencies are looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion holistically. So how are we looking at how we're recruiting individuals, how we're developing them as professionals, how we're making sure that they are prepared to be successful in the agencies, but also looking at, what is the makeup of our workforce. We have a historic event happening right now here in Connecticut, which I'm sure is something that's happening in other states where we coined it the retirement tsunami, but we have a significant portion of our workforce that are getting ready to retire. And as a result of that, we have the opportunity now to look at the demographics and the makeup of our workforce and look at how we can use this opportunity to diversify the workforce moving forward. So I think, the report gives us a roadmap for how to do that, especially on an agency by agency basis.
And that is important, right? Because I think that having the data on hand, it serves as a tool, like you mentioned, a roadmap, not only to reach out, but I guess it's to be more intentional and strategic on how to reach out for other populations within the community of colors and also women, right?
Absolutely.
Is there any internal goal in terms of recruiting X amount of community of color or more diverse population for this year in particular?
I think that that's something, again, that needs to be developed on an agency by agency level. As Tara stated, there are some areas, job classifications, agencies that are doing very well in terms of the amount of women and the amount of people of color that they have employed. And there are other agencies that are not doing so well. So I think it's a case by case basis in which you have to look at how do we diversify each agency based on everything, the services that they provide, and then the individuals that they employ and the programs that they develop. So I think it's going to be, again, on a case by case basis.
And this is really a key moment because the state of Connecticut is anticipating what they keep referring to as a retirement tsunami. There is an incentive
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of employees to retire. And there are approximately 12,000 who are eligible. We don't know, the full universe of who will take advantage of this, but this is a key fleeting moment where every agency is going to have an opportunity to really evaluate where they are and think about what is working and what is not working and come up with their own individualized strategies.
And this can happen anytime soon, like as immediate between February and next year, or if there is a
July 1st. So July 1st of this year is a cutoff for state employees who may be eligible to retire to take advantage of certain incentives. And so some may take it, some may not, but there are some 12,000 who are eligible for retirement. And we're not going to know really until July 1st. We're all preparing for the surge in terms of processing retirements, but the question is, what are we going to do to replace those people? And this is a really one-time opportunity to, really build a workforce that represents the people that we serve in Connecticut.
And I can imagine because this is a historical opportunity, right, for the general community of Connecticut, for those who have been prepared, have the background and education and some areas of expertise or work experience to apply for the very first time to government jobs. But also, it's a great challenge to fill all those positions and avoid any interruption on services. So I guess in terms of the marketing and the outreach, I know that you guys, provided all this information on the report, but I'm sure that this is taken by the agency and the state with a sense of urgency to really get all the information out there for people to apply for these jobs, right?
Absolutely. And this is something, a lot of recruitment and job postings historically has often been left to our human resources, contacts in our agencies. But this is something that we, Mohammed and I, in the recommendations, as you'll see, this is something that the highest level in every agency needs to have their eyes on. It cannot just be, there really has to be a deep dive agency by agency, and each agency's reason for what disparity may exist is going to be different. It's going to be different for a public safety agency than maybe an IT agency. And each agency is going to have to think about what has been working, what is not, how do we better engage with our community. We have our affirmative action plans and process that's really important. That usually is focused on what the available labor market is. Our report really looked not at what the available labor market is, but what the makeup of our state is, our population as a whole, and where do we stand against that bar. So every agency should be looking at it, doing their own diagnosis and their own, prescription for fixing it.
Thank you, and that's great. I just wanted to refer specifically to Tara and Mohammed. There is in your report, you conclude that Connecticut is on track through new hires to perpetuate the underrepresentation by females and minorities in public safety occupations and overrepresentation in some of the lowest paying occupations, including administrative support and paraprofessionals. Um, it is, we know, right, based on what you already said, that it's time is a very great opportunity, not only for the state, but for the community in general, to add additional actions in needs of these occupations with persistent underrepresentation. But my question is, in on top of that, like organizations like ours or any other agency at the local level, how we can combat this? Um, I know that Natalie mentioned that is the task for every agency, right, to address that there is equal opportunities, and there is an incentive or a motivation for communities of colors to apply for these jobs and be able to take full, full opposite of for this growth and these positions. My question is how every local agency is combating this and how they're preparing to really get the word out.
Natalie,
Yeah, I actually think you have had some
you're a
experience
better
with
person to answer this.
this.
I mean, I go back to, the thought is you would like something like this to be centralized, but the numbers and sort of how we need to strategize around this doesn't lead for it to be centralized. It really is specific to each agency. And, you really need to look at, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about sort of recruitment and specifically about recruitment of people of color and women is that you can't just have a job posting that goes up either on the state website or LinkedIn and think that that's going to be the only avenue in which you can bring in diverse applicants. That you really need to have relationships with people in the community, relationships with organizations like the Hispanic Federation that know sort of what jobs are out there and what the criteria is and what the job duties are, and then can then reach out to their members or to people in the communities and refer them to those jobs, or to have, a specific agency like Department of Environmental Protection or DCF or even our office come into an organization or come into a community and talk about what it is that the agency does and what kind of career paths are available. And I think those are the types of steps that we need to take in order to really look at how we're recruiting people and bringing people in, bringing people in um, for the jobs and increasing diversity in the state.
I want to continue on that line because I think that for those who are seeing us right on the virtual Cafecito, and for those organizations that are working and providing direct services to our community, we'd like to know more about these openings that will be available, how they can gain access to the postings, what are the basic requirements, if there are all full-time or seasonal positions. And I know that there, like Tara mentioned, it's over 12,000 potential positions that could be for retirement. Hopefully, those doesn't happen all at once, right? Yeah, what information can we provide to those who are seeing today and would like to seek an opportunity to gain access to those job postings?
I mean, I think the first place for people to look is the DAS website, which is the place that, has every single job for every single state agency is posted on the DAS website. And I think once you look at a job, whether or not it's to work at a specific agency or to work in a specific field, you should really take the time to find out more about that agency and what that agency does. Oftentimes there's contact information in the job posting that allows for you to contact the agency and ask more information about the job. But the first place to start would be the DAS website.
So I have one of the questions from our audience, and it's going back to the reports. And I wanted to make a stop there. For those who are listening and seeing us on live, know that we will provide in the comments and the chat the link that Natalie Brassel just mentioned. And also we will provide you more information on how you can access to those show postings. But there's a question for Tara and Mohammed, that it, the report where it can be found.
I think we need to link it somewhere because we've been emailing it up to now. So we'll fix that.
Okay, so what we can do is we can post it in our Facebook page. You will be able to see that report. We will upload that information, and as soon they upload somewhere else, we will
I
share
can,
it as
we
well.
can, we can probably do it pretty quickly.
Within
Put it
the
up on
hour,
the
we
web.
could probably do it.
Yeah, I think give us a couple. Yeah, I think we can probably post it somewhere and send you the
Beautiful.
link.
Did you see? We already getting demand on that. So, any questions that have been erased after that report that you all work together on? Is there any other follow-up report or any follow-up survey that you
Yeah.
are seeking to do?
So there's a legislative task force that was created to deal with retirements and HR questions, and the task force largely adopted a lot of the recommendations that we make in the report, which is really important. So this is now the task force made a recommendation to the legislature, and the legislature will probably use that. I think the Connecticut Council on Women and Girls is also working on that. So it's the major finding of our report is that if you leave things running the way they have been running, you are not likely to have a huge impact on fixing any imbalance that exists in the workforce. So as Tara said earlier, the state of Connecticut overall, if you put everybody together, looks pretty much okay. But when you start looking at agency by agency, you start seeing that some agencies have always done well in terms of representing people of color and women, and they continue to do well. Some agencies um, have not done well historically, and in the last 5 years of hiring, they continue to not do well. And some agencies have not done well and made some improvements. So the problem is agency by agency, and the solution ultimately has to be agency by agency, because different agencies have different realities right now in terms of representing people of color and women, and their efforts would be different from agency to agency, essentially.
And I think that you guys provided a presentation that we're going to share with audience. And
Mhm.
it is important, right, that after such a great findings, that it would be a tool for elected officials and for uh, leaders in our government agencies to consider and implement. That there is a follow up, right, of before and after. I'm looking forward from here to 2 years or less to see how those policies were impacted by this data, and more important, how many more people of color we were able to recruit afterwards. So David is our communications director, and I just want to take the time to say thank you to all the team that is supporting the virtual Cafecito behind the scenes. We have our program coordinators from New England, Fatima Aviles, and also Selena Marte, our program manager, and David Castillo, our directors of communications. So David, go ahead with the presentation.
Thanks,
Go to the
David. I
next
think you
slide.
can move to the first slide. So as we've been talking about throughout this conversation, the Connecticut state government is going through a transformational moment right now. We have a 2022 retirement surge, sometimes coined the retirement tsunami, where there's approximately 12,000 individuals who are eligible to retire across all state branches and state agencies in the Connecticut government. Of those eligible, more than 8,000 of those are directly from the executive branch. We don't necessarily know how many people will retire. Our best guess indicates somewhere around 5,800 people are expected to retire from the executive branch on or around July 1st of this year. What this presents for us is a historic opportunity to address some of the gender, race, and ethnic disparities that we see in state government, as well as addressing the pay equity issues that we see in state government. Next slide. So, this historic opportunity to address the issues around gender, race, and ethnic disparities also comes with it some drawbacks, which include, significant loss of experience and institutional knowledge, and challenges that we face against recruitment in the private sector. We're moving away from a time in which individuals, stayed at their jobs for 10, 20, 30 years. And we were able to use, the state benefits and pensions and healthcare plans as, effective tools for recruitment. Now those things are not as attractive as they used to be. And we, find ourselves in a position where we're competing against the private sector when it comes to recruitment, especially in terms of salary and pay. Next slide.
So I think I mentioned earlier that we have there was the governor and the lieutenant governor made space for this analysis. The governor created the Governor's Council on Women and Girls, and former comptroller Kevin Lembo had a discussion with the lieutenant governor saying, how can the comptroller's office help? We sit on data, payroll data, demographic data for the entire executive branch. So we saw this as an opportunity to support the work of the council by doing an analysis. We keep talking about how we want diversity and equity, but do we really understand where we stand? So we jumped at the opportunity, and I, had gotten to know Dr. El-Kadri. He was a professor of mine at UConn Department of Public Policy, and I knew he had a history of, a career researching equity in the workplace. So he agreed to collaborate on this analysis, and we pulled payroll data to answer some basic questions. Do Connecticut's new hires, those hired within the last 5 years, do they perpetuate racial and ethnic and gender disparities in certain types of occupations? We had earlier looked at the state executive branch as a whole, but now we want to drill down on new hires, because that really tells us where Connecticut's headed. When people enter public service, they tend to stay there more than sometimes in the private sector. So you really do get a sense, looking at new hires, where we're headed. And we want to look at, where is Connecticut successfully making progress or falling short? Are we staying? Is what we're doing to attract a diverse workforce working, or is it not? Next slide. So we pulled data on 30,000 state employees in the executive branch in March of 2021. We removed part-time employees for a final population of 28,359. Connecticut, unlike the federal government and some other public employers, does not have a sort of way of classifying employees across all agencies. So sometimes that can pose a challenge if we're trying to compare positions across different agencies. So that was a recommendation in one of our first reports. So we looked at EEOC categories that helped us, compare employees across different agencies. We did exclude higher education, we excluded judicial, we excluded legislative, because we don't have the full demographic data for them. So there's some work to be done and some research to be done with those branches. Next slide. So this kind of gives you a high-level view of where we are. Again, unlike affirmative action, we didn't look at the labor workforce, we looked at the census data. So what is the Connecticut census for females, and gender and race and ethnicity? And if you look here, when you look at white females, when you look at the whole executive branch, we're pretty much on par with the female census data. When you look at new hires, the females start to dip. And when you look at Hispanic population, the state workforce falls short across the whole executive branch as well as new hires. Next slide.
So the greatest female balance. So we started off by looking at gender, and then we started intersecting gender and race and ethnicity in later parts of the report. So as you can see, there are categories where women in general, all women, seem to do well. So officials and administrators and professionals are sort of the highest two categories in the public sector. And it looks like women are doing well in terms of general, entire population representation in the workforce, or the entire state workforce, and among new hires, which is the orange line here. So next slide. So, but then things start going down. So the largest female imbalance is places where women are overrepresented, in administrative support categories and among paraprofessionals, where women represent 87% of the workforce today and 83% of the new hires in the last 5 years. Among paraprofessionals, that is also the case. Now, if we look at protective service, which includes state police and other police agencies that fall under the state, only 19% of protective service is women. And as you can see in the orange block right next to that blue block, women also represented 19% of the new hires in the last 5 years. Okay, next. Let's go next. I think a couple more. I think I'm gonna jump to the next slide as well. Okay, so this is Hispanic representation and the largest agencies in terms of Hispanic representation. DCF is 18%. Has appropriate Hispanic representation, which is Hispanics in Connecticut are about 18% of the population. And then, but if you look at other agencies like the police services, only 6% of the police services are Hispanic. If you look at the Bureau of Engineering and Construction at DOT, only 6% are Hispanic. But then you see some improvement there among new hires to 10%. Next slide. So these are all the agencies. I just want you to understand something. So this is, if you look at where the red is, that means that Hispanic representation in the state executive workforce is lower than their percentage in the general population. So let's. So these are the different agencies that do that, and we're going to send this slide over to folks, or the slides are available if anybody's interested in them. So let's go to the next slide. I think we're so this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Among officials and administrators, only close to 8% of the of officials and administrators. There's about 1,100 of them or 1,200 of them. Only 8% of them, or a little bit less than 8%, are Hispanic. And in the population, Connecticut has about 17% Hispanics. So you see where the imbalance is. But if you look at new hires, which is the second set of columns, the second set of 3 columns, you'll see that we're also falling short there. Actually, Hispanic females are getting recruited at a much slower pace than before. So among professionals, same problem: 10%, 10.5% of the state workforce is Hispanic, and there's about 14,000 positions in the state that are like that. While in the population, they're about 16%. And new hire data is not showing that the problem is fixing itself. It needs some other intervention. So I'm going to jump on to the next, just for the sake of time.
Next slide. So rather than looking at gender and race in silos, we did an intersectional analysis where we're looking at what happens when you combine race and gender. And as you can see, that gray line is the white male salary line. That's the reference point. And if you look at the blue bars, which are the full executive branch, versus the orange bars, which are the new hires, you see the patterns continue. And Hispanic males in particular fall short of that from compensation. And I know we're running out of time, and you're all going to have access to this presentation afterwards. So I don't know if we need to wind up and take any questions that folks may have.
Thank you so much for that. And yes, we have one more question, but like Tara said, we will provide the link of this report that you can see through on your pace in your own time. We do have one question. The question is, will the recruitment events and where they can meet or where they can find information about these recruiting events? Natalie?
I think probably the best place for people to look is, again, the DAS website, because they have a lot of information about different not just job postings, but also about different recruitment events or activities. I would also say that if you're interested in a specific state agency, that you should check out their websites to look and see if there are any upcoming events, meet and greets or recruitments. I can only speak for the agencies that I've had experience with, but for example, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is getting ready to hire between 500 and 700 seasonal employees to work in the parks and at the beaches, which, you know, is not a bad summer gig, for the entire summer. So I know that they will have, they will have recruitment events to get people to learn more about sort of what those jobs entail, being a park ranger for the summer, working at the beach as a lifeguard, those type of things. So if there's an interest in that, like check out the Department of Environmental Protection's website.
And those are good ways of getting familiar with an agency,
exactly,
by doing those seasonal jobs to see if this is an environment or a career path that you may want to take to the next level.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. I wanted to say thank you to Natalie, Tara, and Mohammed for joining us today in this insightful panel discussion. We hope that this virtual Cafecito has given you important information about the state of our community and jobs. Hispanic Federation will continue to advocate for policy reform designed to address the many challenges faced by Latinos, immigrants, and others seeking to connect to the workforce system in order to receive a range of employment or trainings or placement services. We are here committed to the mission of empower and advance the Latino community across the board. And here in the state of Connecticut, we invite you to continue to follow us in our social media platform, where we will provide more information about this discussion and upcoming discussions. Remember, our virtual cafecitos will be hosted every third Thursday of every month at 10 o'clock in the morning. Also, we will be posting information about economic recovery programs and services in our community. We have two main programs that in services and training for people to get higher digital skills and get better and higher paid rates in their jobs or seeking for new jobs opportunities. Once again, thank you so much to our special guests in the day. We are very happy to have you, and we look forward to continue the conversation and next steps. Once again, if you want to know more about our work, just please visit our website, HispanicFederation.org, www.HispanicFederation.org. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your morning, and we will see you next month, March, for our next virtual cafecito. Salud.
Thank you.
Everyone.